Well, to summarize again, we'll just go over that again. The day of the Lord. Some of this will be fresh in your minds, no matter how old our brains are. Pre-trib teaches the rapture happens before the day of the Lord. Of course, we all teach the rapture happens before the day of the Lord. Pre-trib teaches the day of the Lord begins with the tribulation. Post-trib teaches the day of the Lord is at the end of the tribulation. And the pre-wrath teaches the day of the Lord begins sometime in the second half of the tribulation, or the 7 years after the rapture occurs, which we don't know when in the day of the Lord. So again, the thing that the pre-trib and pre-wrath both have in common, don't know exactly when the rapture is. But the only thing about the pre-wrath, if this has occurred, remember the abomination of desolation, they know it has to be coming within a reasonable certain amount of time. So with the abomination of desolation, one in Daniel, Matthew, we know there's 3.5 years till Jesus comes back. So you would know the rapture would have to be sometime in that time period. Read bottom of page 140, beginning with first pre-tribulation suggests. So we'll carry that into next week, and we'll implement that into the lesson. All right. The argument from the pre-tribulation perspective is that the wrath begins with the seals. Okay, that's what we're teaching. The pre-trib, the first seal's open, man on white, the 4 horsemen, man on the white horse, red, black, pale. And from their perspective, the rapture has occurred, and this is the beginning of the tribulation. The perspective of the pre-wrath is we're here for that. These are the beginning of the wrath of men, whereas after the 5th seal, it's the wrath of God. And so what we're going to do is look at Matthew 24 and see how the signs that Jesus says are occurring before his return all relate to the seals in order. Here's what the general teaching we've heard most of our life says. What Jesus says in the opening verses as the signs that will happen all throughout the ages, and then he shifts things and begins to teach specifically what will happen during the tribulation. But the pre-wrath is making the position that the signs that Jesus says are corresponding to the seals. Now, I think the position is whether or not these seals begin before or after the 7 years start, not really determined, but they're definitely setting the sign. All right, let's go in Matthew 24. We'll just start at the beginning. Start with verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." All right, that Jesus was talking about the temple being destroyed. This is about 30 AD, and the Romans destroyed it 40 years later in 70 AD. So that's, everyone almost universally agrees that's what he's talking about there, because the temple was destroyed. So that was going to happen in that generation. All right, as I said before, we're all here futurists. We believe the revelation is things that will happen in the future. They're a group in the church called preterists, and they believe almost all the events in Revelation have happened. And when this event occurred here in AD 70, this is when all this stuff occurred, Matthew 24. Of course, we don't believe that for various reasons, but just showing what those people believe from that perspective. So when he says, "There's some of you not tasting of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom," they think that's already been fulfilled because all those people died, of course. Of course, we would teach that we believe he's saying when you people who see this thing, you will not taste of death till you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. All right, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "what will this happen? When will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" All right, now as we get to verse 4, Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you." All right, let's begin now. We'll look at the relation between the first 5 seals and the first 5 things that Jesus said were coming. When did I speak on this? And towards the end of last year, I spoke on a Wednesday night, and I did point out these relations. But let's get one by one. All right. First, Matthew 24:5. Compared to Revelation 6:1-2. Matthew 24:5. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. All right. Revelation 6:1-2. I watched as the Lord opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest. So most, we believe that's the Antichrist. So we see the relation there. Jesus says many false Christs will come. The first, we have the white horse is the Antichrist, right? White horse, Antichrist, false Christ. So there's your 2 relation there. All right. Do these different colors to keep everything. Is that right? Seal number 2, sign number 2. Matthew 24:6-7. Jesus answered, verse 7, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still not to come. Nation will not rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. All right? I should say 7a, because we're going to come back to that verse. All right? So Jesus is saying there's going to be wars. All right, let's go to Revelation, and let's look at the second seal. Back to Revelation 6:3-4. First, let's do Matthew 24. Let's say 7a. And then Revelation 6:3-4. Jesus said, many false Christs will come. White horse, Antichrist. Jesus said there's going to be wars. Revelation 6:3-4. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, come. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. All right, so there again, there's your war there. So we have war, red horse. Here Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars. So you see, Antichrist, wars. So those 2 line up together. All right. Next. There we go. Back to Matthew 24. If it was just one of these that signed the line up, so they could just be convincing. But when all 5 of them seem to come together like this, it seemed like Jesus now is explaining this is the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. All right, Matthew 24, 7b, just very briefly, the last part of verse 7 of chapter 24. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All right. Matthew 24, 7b, earthquake, famine. Then we'll shoot it over here to Revelation 6, 5 to 6. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its ruler was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like the voice among the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and wine." So what is that saying? Food will be in shortage, famine. So 3 for 3. Famine. And we'll say here, black horse, famine. All right, see again, the relation there. All right, 4th seal, back to Matthew 24 again. This time verse 7 and 8. Latter part of verse 7 and what I should have said when I read verse 7 last time, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Now the back part of verse 7 and into verse 8, there will be famine, or after famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrow. So I guess the famine will be up here and the earthquake will be here. All right. So as a result, what does the next seal bring? Revelation 6, 7 to 8. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by wild beasts of the earth. And so, once again, let me see where that's. I'm going back to Matthew 24. The 4th to me was always the weakest point. It kind of just grouped in all the destruction that would summarize the result of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So let's read Matthew 24, 7 and 8 again, the latter part. Earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. All right, so yeah, I would say the 4th seal, that is your probably weakest point, but I will write on there, pale horse and destruction and death, which is basically a summary of all 4 of these: Antichrist, wars, famine, earthquakes, death. Now, the argument from the pre-trib position is this is the beginning of God's wrath. This is the tribulation. You see famine, you see death, disease. All right. So, but here's what pre-wrath points out as a flaw in the pre-tribulation: the 5th seal. All right. Let's go to Matthew. Back to Matthew 24, chapter 9. This is one of the big points of pre-wrath I want to emphasize here. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. All right. So That's Matthew 24 and 9. So, Matthew 24, 9. Persecution. Something we're all guaranteed. All right? And what's its fulfillment? Revelation 6, 9 to 11. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony that they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was completed. So, as Jesus promises persecution there, here we see souls under the altar. So who are these souls? These are people who I'm going to argue are specifically killed during this time period. You know, the always pre-trib says the word church isn't mentioned after chapter 4 until the end of Revelation. But here you could say it doesn't say the word church, but that's who it's talking about. It's followers of the Lord. They're in heaven, but they're crying out for their vengeance. The Lord said, "Here's your white robe, but the time's not yet." Makes it imply that they haven't got their resurrected bodies yet, even though they're spirit beings in heaven. So Jesus talks about persecution, and this is about souls. Now the key point is, the argument from the pre-trib perspective is all 7 seals. This is the wrath of God begins here. But this isn't God's wrath. God's not killing his people. You know, this is man's wrath still. So the point from the pre-wrath is this is man, Antichrist, war, famine, all these are earthquake. Well, this earthquake is just as a result of all the devastation going on here. But these are things that happen naturally and continue to happen. But from beginning at the 6th seal, that's when God's direct punishment is on the people. So, if this is God's wrath, why are the 5th seal is the key here. All these 4 could be argued. This could be God's wrath, but this 5th seal is not. This is man persecuting the church. Then we begin to see things change at the 6th seal. The pre-wrath rapture teaches that the rapture occurs at the opening of the 6th seal, but we won't know exactly when that's going to occur. So from a pre-wrath perspective, here's what we would see. We would see the Antichrist. We would see famine. Some could say we've already seen it. We would see wars and disease. Kind of makes you wonder, you know, we've had COVID. We've got war with the Ukraine. And who knows, and we've seen everything of these 3 just about but the Antichrist. And of course then, intense persecution. The argument of the pre-wrath is when the midpoint, 3.5 years, when the abomination happens, that's when he pours out persecution on the church like that has never been seen. So, if that perspective is right, which in my opinion is, and you've been taught your whole life, right before the Antichrist comes, we're getting out of here. And then all of a sudden you see these things get happening. This, you know, could blow your mind, blow your perspective. So it's just something to think about now before any of these events occur. Because I know when I first heard it, you know, I didn't believe it. I said, no, we're not going to be here for that. But I've changed, of course, on that opinion. Read pages 151 and 52 and comment. So we're not going to do that. All right. Next chapter, Rapture, first part of Second Coming. Read pages 152 and 153 and comment. We're not going to do that either. We're going to remember all these next week. Tune in next week. All right, so what I'm going to conclude with, we'll be a little early today. First of all, you see these correlations here. All right, and now what is this? Let's read the 6th seal, even though I wasn't going to. Let's go ahead and do that. The relation is Now we jump down at the end. So in Matthew 24, after that, the persecuted people are persecuted, Jesus then begins to talk about all the things that are going to happen. Let's just summarize it briefly. At that time, many will turn away from the faith. Of course, we see many false prophets will appear. Increase of wickedness. He who stands to the end will be saved. All right, now, verse, what is this? 15. So after the fifth seal, when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, that's a big key sign. When that happens, the Lord is returning in 3.5 years. Spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Remember Daniel's 70th week, abomination of desolation. Then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So this is when the great persecution begins, at the midpoint of the 70th week, 7 years. Let no one on the roof in his house go down to take anything out of his house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it would be for those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in the winter or in the Sabbath, for there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If these days had not been cut short, no one would survive. All right, what does that mean? All right, from the pre-wrath perspective, let's go down here to a chart again. 7 years, midpoint. This is where the persecution starts here. This is where the rapture is here somewhere before the Lord returns. And that's what it means by these days being cut short. So the church doesn't have to go through these final 3.5 years. If the church did, no one would be saved. So that's what they're saying that point is, if these days had not been cut short. So it kind of makes sense there.
Yes, in my book it says those days will be shortened, means that God will place a limit on the tribulation.
So, and that's what the pre-wrath teaches. The tribulation ends at the rapture. Mm-hmm. And then the day of the Lord is the rest of the 70th week. Mm-hmm. Or where traditionally we were taught the whole 7 years is tribulation, the last 3.5, the great tribulation. Pre-wrath teaches the great tribulation is between the abomination of desolation and the rapture, and the remaining time is the day of the Lord. So, all right. At last time, all right, verse 23. At that time, if anyone says, you look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect. So it says even those who follow the Lord could be deceived. They'll be so realistic. See, I've told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, there he is in the desert, do not go out. Here he is, or in inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. And then finally, verse 29. Immediately after the stress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. All right. According to the pre-wrath perspective, this is now the rapture will occur, all right? And this is the beginning of the 6 seals, right? So you remember that? Matthew 24:9. 29, Matthew 24:29. I'm going to read it again, and then I'm going to read the 6th seal. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. All right, let's read Revelation 6:12 through 13. I watched as he opened the 6th seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as late figs dropped from a fig tree were shaken when shaken by a strong wind. Okay, same thing as what Jesus said there. Exact same thing. So once again, we have the relation between what Jesus said and now, what verses was that? The 6th seal. So, pre-tribulation teaches that this is the second coming in Matthew 24, because right after this it says, then the Son of Man, well, let's go ahead and read that. What I want to do is try to point out what would be a weakness in their teaching. After this, at that time, the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. All right? They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and glory, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. All right? So, pre-trib teaches the rapture's already occurred. This is coming back again and rescuing the Jewish people from the earth. Post-trib is arguing this is the rapture. But if you follow the sequence of the signs, this correlates to Revelation 6 and the sixth seal. You have all this other stuff in the book of Revelation that hasn't occurred yet. So, what does this coming mean that Jesus has talked about? I'll conclude with this final point. Go down here again. All right, I'll show you the difference, sir. This will be my last point of the day. And I've used this point before in talking about this. All right, when you think of the second coming of Jesus, not a trick question. What do you usually think of? I said, what I think of, Jesus coming down, stepping on Mount of Olives, it's splitting, and the kingdom starting. All right. But, all right, when you think of the first coming, what do you think of? You know, Jesus comes to earth as a baby, but I mean, that wasn't the end of his first coming. He got his childhood, ministry, death, resurrection, ascension, and promise to come again. Now, the second coming, the pre-wrath argues, the rapture begins it. Then you have the day of the Lord, where he pours out the trumpets and the vials. Then he returns, and he sets up his kingdom. So the point being, you don't limit the first coming to just one event. So the point being here, you don't limit the second coming to just one event. So Matthew 24 does appear to describe the Lord's coming, but then there's still a bunch of things that will happen after that. So by its coming here in Matthew 24, the post-trib argues that's at the end of the tribulation. The pre-wrath says his coming is for the church before those final day of the Lord, which could last anywhere from 1 to 2 years. We don't know an exact time. So here we have an element of, and we can still hold to the teaching that the Lord's coming in an hour that you don't know. But like the verse says, if you were watching for the thief, you wouldn't be surprised when it's come. So I used to think, thief of the night, he's coming when you don't know. Then when I was post-trib, I was like, oh, when you're watching for the thief, you know when he's coming. No, you don't. You don't know when he's coming, but you're watching for him. So when you know this is going to happen, you're prepared. And so from the pre-wrath perspective, we'll see the abomination of desolation. We'll know in 3.5 years, Jesus' kingdom is coming back. We'll also know that beginning now is going to be persecution like we've never seen. And sometime during that 3.5 years, probably towards the latter part, the rapture will occur, but we won't know when. So you still have that, I don't know exact moment. All right, we'll conclude with that. Thanks for your patience today. We still pretty much cover things. The main thing I want to emphasize is the relation between what Jesus said was going to happen and Revelation. And it also gives a more chronological view of that book. And as you'll see, the pre-wrath teaches what occurs after the sixth seal is a description of what we believe is the rapture in that book.